sold their mule or eaten it, as the case may be. And the houses, they lived in, all of them, in conditions of absolutely black misery, whether it was on a poor farm in the south, in a Hooverville shanty town. They'd no great word anymore because of this. And it's extraordinary to me that it was their being so shaken, so hurt, so lost and so destroyed, which made this immense thing peaceful. Nobody revolted, nobody rioted, nobody did anything. They took it as if it was their fault. And it was pitiful and awful.
Latin American attitude.
I think it was at that time in America, because it was a country in which everybody was very proud, always standing on its own feet, always making its own way. And actually, it's the only real hardship that has happened in the United States of America since the Civil War. And it's the only thing that anybody remembers. They've never been bombed, they've never been invaded, they don't know anything about war. Because after all, the Civil War, they do remember the Civil War in the South, but that's because they're loopy. But in the rest of the country, the only thing they remember and have a horror of is the Depression.
Tell me about your revolutionary activities in that little town in Idaho.
There, the unemployed were working on a job. They had shovels, and they shoveled mud from one place to another. And the contractor who supplied the shovels collected them and threw them away someplace. So then the next day they had no work, and then he got from the government more shovels. And they were very distressed about this, and I was very distressed about this, and I said to them, the only way you get any attention is to break the windows of relief office. If you do that instantly, somebody will come and pay attention. So nobody wanted to do this, because breaking windows is not at all American kind of thing. And however, we got some beer, and we had a lot of beer, and we talked about it, and went off and broke the windows of the relief office. I meantime moved off, because I was going to look at something in Seattle. And as soon as they broke the windows, everybody arrived at once to listen to their beef. And so their beef was taken care of. It was very efficient. And I was in Seattle, and I was recalled to Washington by the FBI.
You were inciting revolution.
I was inciting. And I was in fact fired.
You've seen more wars than anybody I can think of. In one of your books, you wrote that we, that's the people, are guilty of being stupid, that we'll always have wars, that we're either sheep or tigers. We'll never be free of wars because we're stupid. Now, what exactly did you mean by that?
I think stupidity is original sin, and we've all got it. And I'm beginning to think that who's got it worse is those who lead us. And I'm talking about stupidity of feeling, as well as stupidity of thinking. Stupidity of feeling may be the most dangerous one. So they who lead us, who are in a position of great power, and being more powerful, it seems to me they're even more stupid than we are, they trot out their stupidities, and we follow. We either follow or we don't follow. Those who follow cruel stupidities are the tigers. Those who allow themselves to be led to the slaughter of the sheep. But the stupidity starts at the top, and then we all get it. We all sort of get it by osmosis. But I used to think that people were responsible for their leaders. I don't anymore. Yet, of course, individually, the courage and the bravery of individual people is amazing, isn't it? For instance, in Salvador just now, there are some kids running a thing called the Commission of Human Rights, the Salvadoran Commission of Human Rights. They're kids, I mean, they're in their 20s. And they work in a shack behind the Archdiocese office, sort of shack that you had for a construction company. And their job is to collect all the information, all the murders committed by the government security forces, the torture, the kidnappings, the disappearance. It is the most dangerous work possible. Any one of them going out of this place or home is perfectly available to be picked up and found dead in any garbage dump or alongside any road. They're just kids. Nobody rewards them. And the guts, moral and physical, take off against increasingly as governments.
I remember Eye of Stone, who, you know, once described governments as comprised entirely of liars, and nothing they say should ever be believed.
Quite right. And Tolstoy once said, governments are a collection of men who do violence to the rest of us. Between Izzy Stone and Tolstoy, got it about right. They're all bad and some are worse.
You've described the Spanish Civil War as a war between the rich and poor, and also a war in which, as you said, everybody grew up politically. Could you explain that?
If the poor, either as in Spain, defend themselves, or as in Vietnam and Salvador, finally make efforts on their own behalf, then they're automatically considered communist. And that's most fascinating, because this is giving to communism the right to be the sole custodian of social justice, which it really is not. But our side always puts it in this position. We did it in Vietnam, we're doing it in Salvador, we did it in Spain. In Spain, the side of the Republic was Reds. But in fact, the Republic, which had been legally elected, was, if you will, the side of the poor, the majority of the people, and its desire was social reform and social justice. So then it's called Red, as if only Reds care about social justice. Exactly the same thing in Vietnam. The Viet Cong, etc., was Red, but the Viet Cong was opposed to absentee landlords, a totally unfair system of running a country, same as in El Salvador. So the poor are always called Reds, and Reds then become people who are in favor of social justice. Well, I think this is, it's giving it to the Kremlin on a plate. This goes back to the stupidity of governments.
Can you describe some of those moments during the Civil War that have left a rather indelible impression on you, or may have affected you for your work later on, guided your work later on?
Well, the bravery, the enormous bravery of the people, absolutely unbelievable bravery under appalling conditions, because the worst thing in Spain was increasing hunger. And it ended at the very end, when I was in Barcelona at the end. I think the hunger was what finished the country, because the hospitals were full of starved children, and people were so hungry that to walk across a room was an effort, to do anything was an effort. Their bravery and their dignity always stay in my mind, and individual things, I don't know, Madrid, shells coming in to the square in front of the hotel, and a queue of women were queuing up to get an orange, and nobody moving, because it was so important just to get an orange to take home to your underfed family. I know it's very hard to tell you. There's so many. It was a very long time I was there, and every day there was something that moved and impressed me.
But weren't things simpler then? I mean, good was good and evil was evil. Even the fascists obliged by wearing black shirts and brown shirts.
Oh yes, there was a definite enemy. And a definite enemy that all of us kept saying, if you don't stop it here, there will be a war in Europe. And we were regarded as either sandals or fellow travelers or whatever they called us at that time. And then, of course, lo and behold, it came about. And now, of course, it's much more complicated. I personally do not believe that the Soviet Union is about getting ready to invade the NATO territories. In the first place, the Soviet Union knows what war is like, had an appalling war. I believe that they're at least as frightened as us, as we are frightened them, if not more. And although I consider the system monstrous and the people who rule it monsters, I don't think they're maniacs. I think they move in and help people who we refuse to help.
When in wartime, should a journalist censor himself or herself?
I think never.
What about in a war of national survival?
You don't have to worry. They've got the censors. I mean, World War II, everything we wrote was censored.
When is it impossible to be objective?
Well, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I couldn't have reported World War II from a higher level than I reported it, objectively. I would have had to say I thought half of them were idiots, and half of the things that they decided to do were idiotic. But and anyhow, it wouldn't have got into print because it would have been censored. When it's impossible to be objective, but I know Vietnam, for instance, I reported it for here, The Guardian, not for an American paper.
But before you go into Vietnam, what happened on the day you entered Dachau extermination camp? Now, how could you be objective about what you saw in that extermination camp?
Well, I wasn't objective. I didn't have to be objective. I mean, what I saw was my personal war aim. My personal war aim was to get into Dachau. It was the first concentration camp, extermination camp, and I did get there. And I was there the day the war ended. I didn't have to be objective in the sense of what was there to be objective about? It was a total and absolute horror. And all I did was report it as it was. I did not invent anything. If you mean, I don't even know what you mean exactly by objective. If you suppress, I did neither suppress nor invent. I reported it exactly as it was. And if you report what you see, unless your eyes are bad, I don't see how you can be anything but objective. You don't lie, you don't make it different from what it was. You don't conceal something, you don't add something. It's there in front of you, that's what you see. That's what you report.
Could you recall what you saw when you arrived in Dachau?
There was a train on a siding. It was a death train. The SS had left, so they hadn't emptied it. So Germans with handkerchiefs over their face, under the arms of Americans who had gotten there the day before, were opening the doors of it and digging out the bodies of the people who had died in this train. That was the first thing. You went into the gates of the camp and you were sprayed, you opened your clothes and you were sprayed with powder against typhus lice inside. You went inside and there were figures still alive in striped pajamas, skeletons still breathing, sitting and lying about. By the furnaces there were stacked cordwood bodies, yellow, melting, the little fat still on the skeletons, melting in cordwood because they hadn't had time to burn. In the prison cells, the torture cells, there was a woman screaming. She was mad, she was alive, she was screaming. There was a bunch of women in cotton dresses, Jews, who had been sent there from someplace else, who clutched one's clothes and screamed like mad women. There was the infirmary, which was manned by Polish doctors, very quiet,
And then people are trying to look like they don't last.